Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Dychronic, your host here on this Destiny 2 video, and today we're going to be going over my top 10 favorite PvE specials in Destiny 2. And of course, as always, this list is completely subjective based on my own opinion, although there is going to be a spreadsheet where I have in fact included the damage numbers for each of the weapons that I was testing, including DPS, adjusted RPMs to include the reload time, total ammo damage, lots of good stuff. So there's definitely a lot of good empirical information alongside the subjective choices that I've made. And of course, if you've never heard of my spreadsheets before, I always make these beautiful dark theme, color-coded, linked out, pictured out, sourced out, amazing spreadsheets that are completely public and available for everybody to use online right now. If you wanted to get your hands on them, all you have to do is head over to my Discord server, which can be found in the description down below. And then on that Discord server, there's gonna be a channel called #D2 Spreadsheets, which give you 3 categories of spreadsheets, and in each one of them, there'll be a bunch of different tabs to navigate to what you want to know. Beyond that, there should be a link to this specific spreadsheet for this specific video linked at the same date that this video released. But that's not all. There's going to be even more good news on top of that. Firstly, my videos are still rampant with cute animals. So throughout a lot of my videos, you'll have an expected amount of quota for cute animals, and this video is no different. Secondly, I have a giveaway going on right now. Astro A40 headset, blue microphone product, and a Control Freaks gift code to their store. If you wanted to win any one of these items, check in the description down below for the Gleam link. Pretty straightforward. Follow Twitter, follow Twitch. And of course, thank you so much to my sponsors that allow me to do these giveaways every week. If you don't win the giveaways, you can still use my discount codes for 5% off of anything from Astro and 10% anything off of the Control Freaks store. So check those out. They're excellent products that I use every single day. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the main content of this video. We're going to be talking about my spreadsheets a bit more in depth, talking about my top 10 favorite weapons, talking about the DPS numbers of all of these different weapons, of course talking about the 4 main categories of weapons and what's the best types of weapons to use in the current meta, what are the best archetypes in each type, and why each thing is in the place that it currently is. And along the way, we're going to be talking about the things that have been patched this season, talking about the things that are going to be patched and changed next season, which is going to be quite big, so you need to understand it. So those 4 main categories are going to be grenade launchers, fusion rifles, sniper rifles, and shotguns, with some extra categories such as trace rifles, linear fusion rifles, and hand cannons. Moving on, let's go ahead and get started. At the very bottom, we have the grenade launchers. Now, the grenade launchers have fallen from grace pretty far. They used to be a DPS king, the mountaintop especially, but nowadays 6,000 DPS, 3,000 DPS grenade launchers aren't worth much of your time at all. Now, why is it they've fallen so far? It's going to be the reload time. They have to reload after every single shot, and they have 20 shots of full ammo damage, and this is actually reload time with Rally Barricade or with Lunafaction, so this is the best that you can make it. Its adjusted RPM is just tanked. Now, obviously, they have blast radius, so their actual effectiveness is going to be their utility in that case. But beyond that, I just really don't care about grenade launchers. Moving on to the next category, we have the fusion rifles, which obviously are not going to be your DPS kings or even your full ammo damage kings. The highest that you have is 9,000 DPS, 250,000 full ammo damage. At the loaded question, which is going to be your best in class for sure, my favorite fusion rifle in the game no matter what. The reason why it's so low as compared to these shotguns and sniper rifles, to remind you, these sniper rifles and shotguns are closer to 25, 26,000 DPS. The reason why they're so low is because they're easier to use. You know, better aim assistance, you can use them at farther ranges. This is just a utility. Even then, I feel like they need to be better than they currently are, and the fact that they are in fact nerfing them in the upcoming DLC kind of blows my mind. Obviously, the nerf is more centered around the PvP aspect of it. I don't think that fusion rifles are in a place that make them warranted. But honestly, like I said, it makes sense. You know, they have more range, so obviously they can't do as much DPS, and they're also easier to use, so they can't do as much DPS. After that, I just wanted to mention very briefly the trace rifles, which don't really have that much of a place in the meta. They have some pretty nice full ammo damage, to be honest with you, but their DPSs leave a lot to be reckoned with. And when you compare them to a lot of the sniper rifles and shotguns in the game, the worst sniper rifle in the game has better DPS and still very respectable full ammo damage. I just don't find very many scenarios that they're warranted. Moving on to what I consider the second best type in the game, we have the sniper rifles. Now obviously we have the Izanagi's Burden and the Borealis up here, but for the most part, sniper rifles are going to be your second best weapon type. Now, I need to preface this before I get started with the actual numbers. I have to preface this by what we found out in the most recent TWAB about the nerfs that are coming to the general archetype of snipers. Now, what they told us in this TWAB is they're going to be reducing the damage of sniper rifles down to their pre-shadow key values of 20% less damage. The adaptive fire, which is going to be the 90 RPM sniper rifles, are going to have their precision damage modifiers reduced from 3.25 down to 2.95, and finally the rapid fire sniper rifles are just going to have their impact reduced by about 10%. Beyond that, there's also going to be a couple of modifications to Izanagi's burden that we're going to talk about when we get to that section. Now, it's very important that you keep all of that in mind as we continue to look at these numbers, because obviously these numbers are going to be changing a lot over the next season. In a nutshell, when it comes to the sniper rifles, the 72 RPMs, which are going to be your aggressive frames, have a lower DPS amount but a higher full ammo damage. Your adaptive frames, which are going to be your 90 RPM sniper rifles, have a higher DPS, but again, a little bit less full ammo damage. And then finally, we have your 140 RPMs, which have the highest DPS of nearly 20,000, but less full ammo damage than that of the adaptive frame. So you can see a pattern here. The higher the RPM, the higher the DPS, but the lower the full ammo damage. With a caveat here of the 140 RPM sniper rifles, it's not really possible to reach this kind of DPS. You're gonna have to slow your DPS down, and for the most part, I would honestly recommend going with the 72s or the 90s when it comes to general play. Moving on, let's go ahead and talk about shotguns. Now, for the most part, now beyond those extenuating circumstances and those extra perks and the craziness to it, in general, when it comes to shotguns, your best DPS options are going to be your rapid fire and your lightweight frames. As you can see here, we have a couple of aggressive frames, not really that great of kind of damage. You can see here your precision frames, really not that great of DPS or total ammo damage. Up closer to the top, you have your rapid fire frames, much better DPS here. You can see your lightweight frames, much better DPS, pretty much in par with the rapid fire frames. Anywhere from 20 to 25,000 damage, you can find the rapid fire and lightweight frames. Now, beyond that, there's a couple of different ways that things can be changed for shotguns, namely trench barrel. Now, for the rapid fire frame, trench barrel usually tanks the DPS, but improves the full ammo damage. As you can see here, the regular versions have a higher DPS, but a lower full ammo damage. And that's generally a choice. If you want to dump faster, you gotta just shoot regularly. If you want to do more damage, you gotta use trench barrel with that actual punch mechanic. Now, when it comes to the slower fire rate shotguns, like the aggressive frame 55 RPMs, the inverse is true. You can see here the Imperial Decree, which actually has better DPS than that of the Ikelos trench barrel shotgun. You can see that its RPM is around 55 with the adjusted RPM around 48. Its total DPS is full ammo damage. You can see that right there. Compare it to its trench barrel, which its RPM and adjusted RPM is not really affected by very much, and its full ammo damage and DPS are much, much higher. Now, this is just one of a couple of different ways that shotguns can be changed. Obviously, there is the 1-2 punch mechanic, which I have not actually put on this list because Worm God and Winter's Gal are both disabled, and that would be the way that you'd need to test them, because without it, they're not really that good at all. And finally, let's talk about the creme de la creme, the best of the best, the top dogs when it comes to PvE special weapons. Starting up, let's talk about Lord of Wolves. If you did not know, Lord of Wolves has a regular version and a release the Wolves version, where you just hold down the reload button. It switches from a 5 burst to a 10 burst, each one of the shots in that burst doing more damage, allowing the Lord of Wolves to do an impressive 26,000 damage and a bit more full ammo damage as well. Now, it's not a ton more damage, but it's better and faster, so you might as well use it. Now, I will add a caveat, is that they will be nerfing the Lord of Wolves very slightly in the next season, where they're going to be making the Release the Wolves version significantly reduced accuracy, meaning that you have to use it very close for boss damage. So in general, the use cases are not going to be changing too much. After that, I know a lot of you guys were wondering how Borealis ended up at the top. Let me first start by saying the weapon has 2 main perks. The fundamentals, allowing you to change between the 3 different damage types by holding down the reload button, and as well as Ionic Return, allowing you to do double damage after breaking an enemy shield with a matching damage type. So if an enemy has a solar shield, Switch to solar, break his shield with this weapon, and you get double damage for the next 5 shots. And I know what you're thinking. Have I included the fact that you have to burst an enemy's shield in the damage calculations? Yes, I have. I have included the fact that you lose 4 shots on some random enemy's shield. I've also included that into the adjusted RPM, which in turn also affects the full ammo damage and the DPS. This is a nightmare to calculate, but I feel like I've done it right. This is the upper bound when it comes to doing damage with the Borealis. Now, does it have much efficacy in the wild? No, not really. This is just one of those special scenarios that a kind of brain teaser, if you will, an exercise of the brain. This is the best that the Borealis could possibly perform and is more of a major killer than a boss damager. But honestly, it is an underrated weapon and you should use it more often because double damage is double damage. After that, we have the threat level with Surrounded. If you don't know, if you have 3 or more enemies around you, you get a perk called Surrounded, giving you about 50% more damage per shot, meaning that you don't have to punch every 3 shots like you do with Trench Barrel, and you still get the damage of Trench Barrel, allowing you to do some pretty insane DPS and a pretty high amount of full ammo damage. However, it's not often in scenarios you'll be right next to an elite or a boss with 2 other enemies next to you, and you'll be able to do that extra damage. So it's not a scenario that happens very often, but this is similarly to the Borealis, the upper bounds that the threat level can reach. And if you have another shotgun with Surrounded, a lightweight shotgun, or another rapid fire shotgun, it could probably do something similar as well. And finally, let's talk about Izanagi's Burden. For all intents and purposes, Izanagi's Burden is a broken, overpowered weapon. And I will prove it to you in the next 60 seconds. If you look at its DPS, at 42,000 DPS, it is miles above its next competitor, which both of these, by the way, like I mentioned before, are special unique scenarios that don't happen very often. So really, it's comparing itself to Lord of Wolves. At 26,000 DPS, it is way below that of Izanagi's Burden, and it also has more full ammo damage than that of the Lord of Wolves. To give you a visual representation, I actually have some graphs down here. Take a look here. We have Izanagi's Burden, 42,000, and then Lord of Wolves. Do you see how much less this is compared to the expanse that this is generally like radiating over? And to make matters even worse than that, 42,000 DPS is the best in the entire game. If you look at my heavy weapons DPS chart, you see Whisper of the Worm at 38,000 DPS. A heavy weapon is worse than a special weapon. A special weapon getting what, like 3 to 4 times as much ammo in general dropping on the ground than a heavy weapon? That's not okay. Now, there's something very important that you need to understand about how not okay this is. The Whisper of the Worm, with the Catalyst, with Light Nail, with breathing on completely, has a DPS of 38,000, meaning its reload at optimal use is 0. The highest DPS weapon in the game for like 7 seasons in a row, the Darcy, its 140 RPM gets tanked down to 85 RPM. That is much lower RPM with the reload time incorporated in, and it is still like much lower than that of the Whisper of the Worm, and then we have Izanagi's. Do you understand that it is completely broken and overpowered? This makes no sense. Bungie has decided they're going to be nerfing sniper rifles. Okay, that's one way to nerf them. Where is the next closest sniper rifle that's not Borealis? Oh hey, Twilight Oath, 20,000 damage per second. I know what you're asking yourself. They must have had a section in the TWAB where they talked about Izanagi's Burden. They did. They're buffing the Izanagi's Burden. They're changing Outlaw, which is a perk that you get faster reload after getting a headshot kill with no distractions, which allows you to aim down sights with less flinch. A much better choice for Izanagi's Burden. So remind me again how they're buffing the most broken weapon they've ever had and instead nerfing an archetype that has not seen much light of day until Shadowkeep? I don't know what they're doing. I don't understand, and I don't agree. Now, I'm not gonna just tear this down without making a representation of how I think that they should nerf it, because I have a solution that I feel would be very good to fix Izanagi's Burden. Now, not a lot of people are gonna like to hear this, but it's actually quite simple. So what I've done here is I've copy and pasted in a second row so I can show you the calculations as they happen and keep around the old number. The way I think Izanagi's burn should be changed is to tank the reload time and tank the total ammo. Both of these will affect the full ammo damage and DPS accordingly. So first of all, if we change the reload to, let's say, 3 seconds instead of 2 seconds, that tanks its DPS all the way down to 30,000 with just 50% more reload time. Not even, less than 50% more reload time, we're getting a more understandable DPS, which is much lower than that of the Wisp of the Worm. Already, it's in a place that makes more sense. On top of that, we could also reduce its full ammo damage. Instead of having 20 shots, let's reduce it down to 16 shots, and already the full ammo damage is a little bit less than it was, which is a very respectable amount of full ammo damage that honestly, we could even reduce it down to 12 shots. And it would still be a viable weapon. At 30,000 DPS and 270,000 total ammo damage, this is a still very viable weapon. And I wrap it all back to the beginning and I ask again, Bungie, why are you nerfing snipers and leaving the Izanagi to be in relatively the same position that it has been for the last 2 seasons? This is the problem, not snipers. This sniper is down here. Izanagi is up here. That's the problem. Anyways, I'm not going to continue to ramble your ear off. I feel like I've presented my argument effectively and completely. And if you guys disagree, please let me know in the comments down below, because I'd love to have a discussion about this. I am a complete nerd, especially a complete nerd about this game, and I want to know your opinion of what you think about these weapons and why they should be the way they should be. But that's it. That's the end of the video. Hope you guys did enjoy. Of course, my name has been Dychronic, and I will see you guys on the next one.